Hello peeps, we're at the end of the video, but it's the beginning of the video. I just wanted to kind of redo the intro, or give a intro if you will. This video is a specific, very specific video about the 633A transaxle found in garden tractors. It's popular with mud mowers, and that's what I'm into, is mud mowers. So we're going to take a deep dive into this transmission, get technical and nerdy, okay? Do what you want to do, but I wouldn't sit here and watch this if this is not your wheelhouse, if you're not wanting to learn about the detailed gear ratios and power flow of this particular transaxle. Then just go ahead and click away and watch one of my other videos, like the video where I ride my tractor around and do some difficult obstacles in it. Hey, that video is doing pretty good. So far, I think it's gotten the most views in a 24-hour period that I've ever had. But so feel free to click away. But if this is what you really want to, spend the next 25-30 minutes watching, by all means. I get pretty nerdy on this thing, go pretty deep. That's your warning. All right, let's rejoin the video at the beginning. Hello, peeps. Whoa. Here I am. How is it going? Today is going to be part 2 of our 3-part video series on the 633A. In this part, we're going to take a deep dive. We're going to dissect this thing. I've already counted all the teeth on every gear, so I can spare you that, but I will be giving you that information. We'll be figuring out the gear ratios and the overall gear ratios, so that information is in your hands now, or will be. And then we're going to talk about power flow and shaft rotations, and that'll be it for this video. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, I got my gloves on. Let's dive right in. We're going to start with the input shaft, and for now we're just going to go over the gears real quick. And then I'll put the case in here and we'll start putting it together so you can see how it all works together. But we're going to start with first gear. Now, with any transmission, you've got 2 gears at least to make up a gear, okay? And in this case, we've got 19 teeth on the input shaft, and on the main shaft, first gear has 53 teeth, okay? And I will show that real quick. Let me just get all these gears. So, this is 53 teeth, this is 19 teeth. Okay, the input shaft drives this one. This one's on the main shaft. So you can see a small gear driving a big gear. That's 19 and 53. If we do the math, we come up with a 2.8 to 1 ratio. So call it a 3 to 1 ratio in first gear. Okay. Now then, this same gear drives reverse, because it slides down into first and then up for reverse. Okay, and you'll see all that when we start putting it together. But our reverse gear, which is right here, has 44 teeth. So once again, 19 driving 44 gives us a ratio of 2.3. So in reverse, we have a 2.3 to 1 ratio, okay? So that takes care of first and reverse. Then on the input, we also have this gear. This is 2 gears welded together. You can see the weld right here. This big gear on top is 38 teeth. The smaller gear on the bottom is 29 teeth. Well, that's on our input. So our second gear, which is the one on the bottom, is 29 teeth, and that is driving 43 teeth. What happened to 43? Where did 43 go? Here it is, 43. Okay, that is your second gear ratio. So back to this, 29 into 43. Actually, it's the other way around. 43 divided by 29 is 1.5. So we have a 1.5 to 1 ratio in second gear. And then in third gear, uses a smaller gear, which is 29 teeth. I'm sorry, I might have said that backwards. Second is the 29 teeth. Third is the 38 teeth. We've got 38 teeth going into 34 teeth. Weigh it up. Hold a second. Did you notice that? So far, we've had a smaller number going into a bigger number. Now we got a bigger number going into a smaller number. That's right, this makes third gear an overdrive. That gives third gear a ratio of 0.9 to 1, okay? Third gear's an overdrive. How interesting is that? So that takes care of those shafts. Now then, backing up to our first gear, the one with 53 teeth, we've got a gear on the bottom that you normally don't see when it's in the case because it's hidden. And that has 15 teeth. Let me just triple check, transfer, or is that 13 teeth? I can't read my own writing. I thought that was right. That's a 2.6 to 1. All right, that's going to throw all my numbers from here forward a little bit off, but that's okay. So we got 15 teeth on this gear on the bottom, driving our next gear, which is on a different shaft. So this is our third shaft so far. I call this one our holy shaft, and I call this gear on the bottom our holy gear. That small gear on the bottom of first gear, that 15-foot gear, 15-tooth gear, drives this 39-tooth gear. So 39 divided by 15 is roughly 2.6, okay? I will double check the math and correct myself on the screen if I'm wrong. Okay, now moving forward, this holy shaft, once we get past this holy gear, these two gears are driving our low range, okay? This top gear drives our low range. This middle gear is our high range, okay? We got 13 on the small gear, we got 22 on this bigger gear, the middle gear, okay? And with that information, we come over here to our high-low shaft. This is our fourth shaft, if you're keeping track, okay? This gear, which has two gears on it, let's take this off just for a second so you don't get confused. Has two gears on it, and see how it slides on the shaft, okay? If you come all the way up, that is low range. Down is high range. When you're up, you've got this bigger gear being driven off the smaller gear. And when it's down, you've got this medium-sized gear driving another medium-sized gear. So we've got 13 teeth going into 32 teeth. So that's 32 divided by 13. That gives us roughly a 2.5 to 1 ratio. In high range, we've got 22 teeth driving 23 teeth. 23 divided by 22 gives you 1.05. Now pause for a second. How am I doing the math on these gear ratios? It is always, because it's really tempting to always use the bigger number, but as you saw in third gear, there's an overdrive going on there. So what you got to remember is the gear that is doing the driving is the driving gear, if you will. The other gear that's being powered by that gear is the drive gear. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Driving gear goes into drive gear. Usually it's the smaller gear is the driving gear and the bigger gear is the drive gear, but not always, as you saw in third. So it's always the drive gear divided by the number of teeth on the driving gear. Okay, so in the case of low range, it's 32 divided by 13. If you do the math, that comes out to roughly 2.5. Now, I'm rounding up because I don't, if you use a calculator, you get 4, 5, 6 decimal places. I'm just rounding up or down to the nearest tenth or the nearest point, whatever. Okay, so the high range, we've got 23 divided by 22 is 1.05. It's really close to 1 to 1. So it's really tempting just to say 1 to 1, but I crunched the numbers. It has a small impact on the numbers, so for the sake of accuracy, we're going to leave it in there, okay? Now we come back to this gear right here. 12 teeth on this gear. This sits at the top of this high-low shaft right here, okay? That is what I call a transfer gear. Just like the gear on the bottom of first transfers over to the holy gear, this is another transfer gear, and it transfers over to this, I call this a top hat gear. This is at the top of the shaft that is right up against the differential, okay? And it has 31 teeth. And this gear that drives it has 12 teeth. So if you do the math on that, 31 divided by 12, we come up with a ratio of 2.6 to 1, okay? This is that shaft. This gear right here, pinion gear, but technically it's not, because it's not a ring and pinion, it's a bull gear. But I'm going to call it a pinion, or you want to input gear to the bull gear. It has 12 teeth on it. And I got my differential sitting right here. It has 34 teeth on it. So 34 divided by 12, 2.83 to 1 final drive ratio. We're going to do a couple things to simplify the math moving forward. We're going to take that top hat ratio, the gear reduction that happens between the high-low shaft and that input shaft to the final drive, we're going to take that 2.6, we're going to multiply it by that 2.83, and that gives us an overall ratio of 7.3. We're going to call that from this moment forward our final drive ratio. Okay? So to keep things simple, our final drive ratio is now 7.3. Okay? So our low range is 2.5, our high range is almost 1 to 1, it's 1.05 to 1. Now, we're going to back up to the actual input side of the transmission, or the geared part. This is where your 3 gears are, and then depending on whether you're in high or low, that's how this transmission ends up being a 6-speed. It doesn't really have 6 speeds. It only has 3 speeds and then a high and low. We're going to crunch the numbers on all of these, and remember there's a reduction going from the main shaft on the 3-speed to this Holy shaft. That reduction is 2.6 to 1. Okay, we're back. So moving forward, we're going to multiply the 3 different ratios. We're going to leave reverse out. We're going to multiply the 3 ratios by low range and then by high range, and that'll give us our overall gears. Okay, so in first gear, our overall, or not our overall, but our first gear ratio is 2.8. Multiply that by the reduction that happens between the main shaft and the Holy shaft, and which is 2.6. We come up with 7.28. So from this point forward, the overall reduction in first gear, or first low, is 7.28. In second gear, that overall reduction is 3.9, second low. Third gear, we got 2.3. Fourth gear, fourth gear, I did not crunch the numbers for, but what we did do is then we took the low range reduction, multiplied it by that overall reduction in each gear, and then multiplied it by the final drive ratio. Okay, so real quickly, let's recap. You've got a reduction in each gear, well, except for third, it's a slight overdrive, but you've got a reduction in each gear, first and second, and then also fourth and fifth. Then you got a reduction going to the Holy shaft. And then you've got a reduction into the high-low shaft, whether it's 2.5 or 1.05. Then you got another reduction going into that top hat shaft, or the input shaft for the bull gear, and then you've got a reduction going into the actual bull gear. So to make math simple, overall reduction in first times the low range reduction times the overall final drive ratio gives us in first gear a ratio of 133.2. Okay? Now you should be able to come up with the same number if you go back in the video, and every single gear that I hold up and tell you what the tooth count is, you should be able to figure that out. Check my math if you want to, and then if I'm wrong, let me know. Our overall reduction in second gear, everything included or considered, is 71.2 to 1. In third gear, it's 16.4. In fourth gear, or first high, it is 55.8. In fifth gear, or second high, it's 29.9. And then in sixth gear, or third high range, we've got 17.6. Okay? So we have a spread of first gear to sixth gear. We've got 133.2 all the way up to 17.6. Okay? Now, in my case, if you take my pulley ratio, which is a stock ratio for this tractor, I have a 2.125 or something like that. So if you multiply that by my first gear ratio of 133.2, you come up with an overall gear reduction of 283 to 1. Okay? Now, that's rounding things up. If you went to like the second or third decimal place, I think I've come up with like 276. But can you tell the difference between 276 and 283 or even 285? No, you can't. But let's just say 283 to 1, that is low. I can put my tractor in first gear, low range, let the clutch out, and get off of it. And even with my prosthetic leg, I can walk and outrun the tractor. Okay? All right, so that's all of our gear ratios. And we're going to move along quickly so this video doesn't end up being long. I want to keep this video relatively short. Okay? So we're going to reposition everything, and we're going to get the case over here, and I'm going to show you all the power flows and whatnot. Okay, the first thing I want to point out to you is what's happening with our reverse, okay? This is a primitive transmission. It is not constant mesh, and it is not synchronized, and it has straight tooth gears, or straight cut gears, I should say. Straight cut gears are stronger, but they're louder. Modern manual transmissions in cars and light trucks have helical cut gears. Makes them a little weaker, but it quiets them down. Now, however, with that said, this reverse idler shaft, it's a third gear thrown into the equation to change the direction of the main shaft, okay? But this transmission changes direction every time there's a shaft change, okay? It goes from counterclockwise to clockwise to counterclockwise to clockwise to counterclockwise to clockwise. Well, this just throws an extra change in there so that overall you end up backing up, okay? Ordinarily, it's counterclockwise on the input, and the differential spits out clockwise at the axle shafts. But by throwing this gear in there, now it's counterclockwise and counterclockwise, and that equals going in reverse. But what I wanted to point out, this reverse gear, there's just a machined surface, and it rides right here on this little shaft. I hope it shows up. No bearing. I've heard it called a bushing, but I think you can pop this shaft out and replace it. But if you're in gear and you're rolling the tractor, this gear is spinning. Whether you're in first or sixth gear, this gear is spinning. If you've ever heard that 633s do not like pulley swaps, you can really only get away with a mild pulley swap, okay? My factory pulley ratio is, like I said before, it's a 2.125, okay? I'm going to do a mild pulley swap, get it closer to 1-to-1. That's about, from what I hear, I don't have personal experience here, but that's about all you can get away with. And the two problems, well, really there's three problems of going any faster. Is first is this is your input shaft right here. I went ahead and stuck that in here. The bearing at the bottom of this input shaft where it goes to the case, it's a tiny bearing. See the size of this, the bearing rides right here, okay? That's a small bearing. It doesn't like high RPMs, okay? When you pulley swap, you speed up the input RPM, okay? So that bearing tends to fail. And then, just like we mentioned, since this reverse gear is always rotating, it doesn't always have power going through it. Power only goes through it when you're in reverse, but it's along for the ride any other time. You speed it up too much, this thing's creating too many RPMs, creating too much heat, and there's been reports of this reverse gear either seizing up or exploding and taking out the entire transmission, maybe even damaging the case in the process. So that is why you hear 633s don't like pulley swaps. Everybody says that a mild pulley swap's okay, but you don't want to get too radical. And the third problem is with the axle shafts. The axle shafts go through a bushing. There's no bearings on the axle shafts, okay? And that's the third problem. I don't think anybody's experienced that failure because usually the input bearing or the reverse fails first. If anybody has ever had an actual axle shaft bushing failure, let us know. But I am looking into doing some sort of speed up kit. I'm not very far along on it. It's just an idea in my head. And if you never hear anything else from me about it, it's because it just wasn't feasible or I couldn't make it happen with my limited knowledge and abilities at the time. Okay, all of that said, we're going to move on to power flows. Now on this input shaft, remember our first and reverse gear, okay? That rides all the way down here at the bottom of this input shaft, and actually it goes on first and sits down here at the bottom of this case. Is that all the way in? Yes, okay. It normally rides, what am I catching on? Did it come unsplined again? Little son of a biscuit eater. It normally rides in this middle position, okay? And it's got a shift fork connected to it. For this part of this video, we're leaving the shift forks out and we're leaving all the washers out. That's going to be in part 3 when we do the actual assembly. But just to show you the power flow and all the rotation changes. First gear rides in the middle. That's the neutral position for first and reverse. Down is first. And if you see when I pull it up here, now we engage that reverse gear, okay? But when we're not in reverse, this gear drops out However, the main shaft gear is always in contact with this reverse idler, so that reverse idler is always spinning, okay? All right. Now this is our, remember the welded gear I showed you? That is our second and third gear. It rides here on top. And it also ordinarily rides around in neutral. If you're in first or reverse or neutral, this gear is sitting right here in the middle position. If you put it down, it will engage with the main shaft gear, and we'll throw that in here in a second to show you, and that is your second gear. Move it all the way up, and this top gear now engages with third gear on the main shaft, and now you're in third gear, okay? We have to leave that off for a second while we get in here and put our main shaft in. Okay, I'm gonna have to stand up on one leg. I got my leg off. I do that a lot because it's easier on me. Okay, I have to put this gear on first because reverse is in the way. So just to simplify things, I'm throwing reverse out of there for now. But you don't have to take reverse off if you're just assembling it this far, but you can if you want to. Just take good notes to know what you're doing. Okay. Now, on this main shaft, they made it easy. Big gear on the bottom. Exclude that small gear that's on the bottom of first gear, which is, but anyway. Big gear, 53 teeth. Next biggest, which is 44 teeth. Spacer, 43 teeth, and then 34 teeth. Okay, but before we put that on, let's put this gear into the equation. Okay, now I've been getting this backwards. I think this gear here in the middle, but no, I think I got it right this time. I think I finally got that down. Okay, yep, that's third gear. Now you can see how they spline together. Now I want you to notice something real quick. I've got first engaged and I've also got second engaged shafts locked up. That's because you're trying to power through two ratios at once. One of these has to be in neutral or nothing will turn, okay? Now then, by holding that gear up, we're in first gear, okay? If I hold this gear up somewhere in the middle, well, I can hold it all the way up because I took the idler gear out. That's convenient. Now we're in second gear, okay? All the way up is third gear. Let it fall down a little bit. The case normally controls that. And that's third gear, okay? Now you can see what's going on with these gears sliding up and down, okay? That's how we come up with all of those ratios. Now then, the next shaft in our discussion, and we have to kind of back up a little bit here and disassemble a little bit. I'm going to take this shaft out. Come over here to our holy shaft. We kind of have to do a little dance. A little bit of a dance. It's easier with the reverse gear out, but it's possible, very possible with the reverse gear in. I'm not saying you have to take reverse out. There, gotta just kind of force it. Can't find it, grind it. All right, now we can reassemble this shaft. 44 teeth, 43 teeth, spacer, 43 teeth, there, and then that gear. Let's put our input on first. Okay, we're going to leave first and reverse gear out of here just because I don't feel like holding too many teeth up at once. And then we're going to let that fall down into second gear. So now we're in second gear from here forward, just because that's what gravity wants to happen. Okay. Now, quickly notice how input goes counterclockwise, main shaft goes clockwise, holy shaft goes counterclockwise. Okay? Now then, armed with that knowledge, let's throw our high-low range in here. With gravity taking over, that's high range. Notice counterclockwise, clockwise, to counterclockwise, to clockwise, okay? Now when we add our top hat shaft or our counter shaft or input shaft to the differential, counter, clockwise, counter, clockwise, counter. And then if we threw our differential in here, we'd be back to counter. Okay? Let's do that real quick. We have to back up again. Those two shafts, the high-low shaft and that top hat shaft, cannot be in there because they interfere. And I got my hole in the table. Ow! Son of a gun, that hurt. Let's get through this video before I start bleeding, because I think that's coming. Ouch! So our high-low shaft goes in. Then followed by our top hat shaft gear. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that hurt. Refilming this last little section because smashed my finger, it bled, it hurt, I got pissed off. So differentials in, power flow is counterclockwise to clockwise to counterclockwise to clockwise to counterclockwise, back to clockwise. And we showed all the gears and how they mesh together, and we went over all the ratios. So that should conclude this video. I hope this helps somebody. I hope somebody finds it useful in the future. I know that was pretty long and boring. Hopefully you only watched it if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Surely nobody would sit through this if they were just checking out videos. But if you're in the process of rebuilding one of these or modifying it or what have you, this information may help you. So that will conclude part 2. Stay tuned for part 3, where we final assemble this and put all the shift forks and all the washers in the correct place and button this thing up. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Smash the bell, because what the hell. And as always, toodles!